Hey oboists! Have you ever found it difficult to sort out when and how to find a new oboe or English horn? Oboe Chicago streamlines the process, providing personal and professional consultation and a large selection of lovely instruments. The process feels comfortable and thorough. Selection includes Effleuré of Paris, Howarth of London, Covey oboes, and Fox products. For a current listing of Oboe Chicago's selection, please visit www.oboechicago.com. For a credit of $100 towards shipping, mention Double Reed Dish when you call or email Shauna. That's oboechicago.com.
Chemical City Double Reeds is a full-service double reed shop specializing in the sale of instruments, cane, accessories, and sheet music. Double Reed Dish listeners can enjoy free shipping with code DRDISH. Visit them in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or online at www.chemicalcityreeds.com.
Hi, I'm Galit Kaunitz.
And I'm Jackie Wilson, and you're listening to Double Reed Dish,
a podcast for oboists,
bassoonists,
and the people who love them.
Happy Friday!
Oh, it's Friday. It's that blessed day.
Yeah. I'm excited. How are you doing?
I'm good. This is an appropriate dish topic for today. We're talking about self-care. I'd love to start with you because I just spent the last 15 minutes just like screaming complaints into the microphone pre-recording.
Well, venting is a type of self-care. Expressing your feelings to your loved ones. That's an important part. You were making room for your emotions.
Oh, thank you. That's so gracious.
I admire you for that.
She says, covered in like black goo from my screaming.
Listen, as we all know, teaching in these like unprecedented times.
If I hear that phrase one more time,
it feels longer. Like this is week 4 of the semester for us, and I would say it feels like later in the semester.
I would say that the students would agree.
Yes.
Jackie, what are you doing for self-care these days?
I have actually been really trying to be thoughtful and prioritizing smart choices for me. And I've done a couple of things that kind of came to mind when we said we wanted to talk about this. The first is that I'm currently on a social media break.
Yes.
I decided to do that. Well, I did one this time last year and it really served me well. I even just kind of I know shame shouldn't really be a part of self-care, but like when you first go on a social media break, realizing that your thumb has a physical impulse to go to the app, I was like, whoa.
100,000%.
And so just kind of taking a little bit of time to undo that and focus my attention elsewhere. But I did it not so much like, oh, the things I see weigh on me or I'm performative, but I did find I was like kind of doing the mindless scroll.
Oh, yeah.
And if I added up all the time I was doing, it's like, I don't have time to read. I don't ever have time to take a bath or blah, blah, blah. It's like, yes, you do. You're scrolling your time away. And so I realized that for me, I needed to pull back a little bit on that. And I am trying to use the time not on like, okay, so I'll read this article on the internet. It said, but like reading a book, and I got my Pullman library card. I didn't have my Pullman library card yet.
Look at you.
And I got that, and I checked out the contactless book pickup. So I'm doing that. And this weekend is my husband's birthday. He's Valentine's Day, baby.
Oh, I love it.
And so we've decided to get out of town. It's we're not breaking any COVID rules. We're not seeing anybody. But we got an Airbnb in a neighboring town, and we're just leaving our laptops and work behind, and we're gonna just go somewhere else with a comfy looking couch and a smart TV, and we're gonna get some takeout and we're gonna unplug literally and veg out and quick weekend little vacation trip. And I'm so looking forward to that. Oh my gosh. And just kind of realizing it doesn't have to be, going to Italy for 2 weeks to just get a little vacay, recoup, reconnect
Sounds
time.
incredible.
So those are two things that kind of come to mind that I'm doing for myself, which is, I guess, self-care. How are you approaching that lately?
I have a new hobby, which is the curly girl hair method. So I've been learning as I'm growing my hair because, as you know, this is the first time in like 15 years I've had long hair. And it's not quite shoulder length, is very long for me.
Mhm.
I've been growing out a pixie for quite a while. And I always thought I had super bad frizzy hair. Turns out I just have a lot of texture in my hair. So I've been like diving into all these different like tutorials on like how to do
Mhm.
curly hair and like how to make it real cool looking and healthy. And it's been giving me something to obsess over that is not reads or practicing or work. So
Mhm.
that's been really distracting and fun. I have also, if I get to the end of the what? If I get to the end of the day and I'm like breathing fire out of my mouth, I'll just take a nighttime shower.
Uh, I am so glad you brought that up. That
Yeah,
is very therapeutic.
I love a nighttime shower.
Yes.
Do you know what else I've been doing that's been super key? Is our puppy Ruby is so fun and rambunctious and just the crazy meatball. And she's wonderful and I love her, but it makes it very difficult to work
Mhm.
from home during the day.
Right.
So my wife and I have compromised and we are taking her to doggy daycare once or twice a week so that she can just go nut with other dogs for 4 hours in the morning and then come home and pass out for the rest of the day.
Just exhausted.
And I'll tell you, that is the most brilliant idea my wife has ever had because I was like, yeah, I'm with them all day. And she's like, well, I'm at work all day. Blah, blah, blah. We get home at, in the evening. We're like, it's your turn. No, it's your turn. So she's like, why don't we just take the puppy to doggy daycare and have someone else make her tired? And I was like, that's the most brilliant idea you've ever had. And it is fantastic because she's so much happier and so
Hmm.
much more tired. And it's
Hmm.
just wonderful. It's wonderful.
That's awesome. Something else I've been doing lately is pursuing things that I was maybe reluctant to pursue.
Mm.
So I don't know if you ever like have an idea and it's like, oh, that would be cool. And it just kind of remains out there on the periphery of like something I might do someday, maybe. And there have been a couple of ideas that require a lot of vulnerability of me, that I have recently returned to. One, I know I'm talking around it, I'll just say it. One is composing. And I was playing around with a couple ideas actually a couple years ago. And I literally was like, this is stupid. This makes me feel embarrassed. I'm putting it away. And like, I recently got back out playing around with some ideas, and maybe it'll go somewhere, maybe it won't, but just saying, like, no, if you have this inclination, just kind of pull the thread, like we were talking about last
Ooh,
episode,
yeah.
and play around. And so I'm kind of proud of myself for doing that and not basically unpacking some toxic perfectionism around like,
Ooh.
if I'm not Rachmaninoff, it's a bad idea to play around on finale and just, have some fun.
Well, I wasn't born Brahms. I guess I'm never doing this.
Right. It's like you don't have to be Rembrandt to enjoy an adult coloring book and have some fun with that, Jackie. I default to a place of intensity and perfectionism, and it has to be the best thing ever. And it's like,
I do too.
you can just kind of improvise and have fun and play around. And so doing that, there are some classes at WSU as faculty. We get to take free classes, which, you know, you don't want to enroll in too many and have the tail start to wag the dog and be like stressed out because you're taking a full credit load while teaching a full credit
I must
load.
be perfect at teaching a full load and taking these fun classes.
And no one needs like 800 degrees. But there have been some things that I was like, oh, if I could redo undergrad again, I would take a this class or a that class. And this week I wrote the emails of like, so how do we go about enrolling in those classes? What does that look like? And blah, blah, blah. And so just starting to see you know, what it would take to take those things that seem fun on the periphery and create space for them in my world.
That reminds me of a concept I was recently introduced to. It's from this podcast that I can't say the name of because it has a bad word in it, but it's Unf Your Brain.
Oh, Unf Your Brain. Okay.
That's right. And I listened to this episode about perfectionist fantasies and tomorrow thinking. And it's this idea of like, I have this goal that I'm going to be the world's best oboist and I'm going to have the most incredible career. And that's a job for a version of me that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a fantasy. So when you say, okay, in the future, I'm going to be oboist number one. And then you say, okay, great. What does it take to be oboist number one? Can you practice 3 hours today? And you're like, absolutely not. I can't practice 3 hours today. That shows you that it is a perfectionist fantasy because it's not the current version of you that can take this tiny steps to do that thing. It is some imaginary version that doesn't exist. And it is an addictive, seductive myth that you will never reach.
If the steps I can take today will get me toward that goal, then it's realistic and healthy. If the steps I can take toward it, it's still out of reach, then I need to reassess and manage my expectations. So I'm not constantly disappointing myself.
Yeah. It's like, what can you do today?
But yeah, and that's enough.
Yeah. And it's like you said, managing expectations. Okay, what can I do today to get me closer to this goal? And it's tiny things. It's not huge things. We're so seduced by the huge thing. Like, ooh. But we don't expect ourselves to actually do it.
Yeah. And for me, it's been welcoming other goals alongside I want to be the greatest bassoonist ever and carving out time for other parts of myself that I think it's very easy for me to make bassoon goals and career goals. And then in the process, other parts of my personality or humanity kind of get untended to. And so I've been trying to do a better job of that recently. And I don't know if that has a ton to do with the oboe and the bassoon, kind of Galit and Jackie therapy hour, but it's our podcast, so deal with it.
Janet Ingle loves the oboe. She has built her business on providing high-quality handmade reeds, education, and a sympathetic ear to oboists across the country. When you order from Janet Ingle Reeds, you get prompt communication, reeds or cane handcrafted to your specifications, and cheerful, friendly customer service. All orders are mailed within 1 week, sometimes much faster. Single orders or monthly reed subscriptions are welcome, and she'll work with you to find the combination of response, resistance, stability, and flexibility that is right for you. Janet doesn't just do reeds either. Look at janetingle.com for a selection of reed cases, swabs, and tools, or for reed making videos, classes, and boot camps. Podcast listeners can use the code DISH for 10% off their first order at janetingle.com.
Ugly Duckling Oboes is dedicated to the development of young oboe players. They provide quality handmade oboe reeds, private lessons, and high-quality oboe sales, rentals, and consignments. The oboes that they rent are conservatory mechanism oboes that include the left-hand F key and low B flat key. All are maintained by oboe-specific technicians. In-person lessons are available, as well as virtual lessons for students who live outside the geographic area or have transportation and scheduling challenges. They also offer online college audition coaching for high school juniors and seniors who plan to audition to be music majors. Visit uglyducklingoboes.com for more details on how you can set up yourself for success and sign up for their newsletter. That's uglyducklingoboes.com. We are pleased to welcome John Dee, professor of oboe at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Welcome to Double Reed Dish.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that very much. It's great to be here with you.
Could we help our listeners get to know you a little bit better by introducing yourself to them and talking them through your training and educational journey?
Sure. I guess just currently, as said, I'm actually the Bill A. Nugent Endowed Professor of Music Performance and oboe professor at the University of Illinois, which is very, very cool. And I was so fortunate to come into a position that they gave me that endowed professorship. And I think that was because of the years that I was fortunate enough to play in orchestras and such. And so I do serve in a few different capacities over there, in addition to teaching the oboe. So that's what I'm currently doing. I'm also principal oboe of two local orchestras that have the honor of playing in the Krannert Center for the Performing Arts, which is such a beautiful facility. It has like 5 halls. It was built by the people who built the Lincoln Center in New York. And so we play in there in the Great Hall, and it's the Champaign-Urbana Symphony and also the Symphonia da Camera. So there's a active musical life here in a small town of Champaign, about 150,000, but a tremendous arts center. And sometimes we start to feel like it's the center of the world in so many ways, whenever you travel, people seem to come from here. And so it's a great, wonderful part of my life, just being associated with such a great university with an active arts situation. I guess when it comes to background, I grew up not too far from here in Chicago. It's about 2.5 hours up the road. And really, very typically for a lot of us, because we're speaking to students on this broadcast, and I think it's very important. I was very lucky to start, like many of us, in a healthy band program. I didn't have a grammar school program at all. I didn't even know what an oboe was until probably the end of 8th grade. And actually, my brother brought an oboe home from the band director when he was in high school before me, and he said, "You have a younger brother? Here's an oboe. See if he wants to play it." And I wanted to play bassoon like my brother, but Dad thought it might be good to play something smaller and lighter and cheaper. So we went ahead and I tried the oboe. I looked it up, and what's an oboe? And I just took a shot at it. And I just started out right at the beginning of high school, really just before high school. And I'd asked my mom if it sounded like an oboe yet, because we'd play some recordings, and she said, nope. And so, like for years, she said, nope. And so I kept working harder and harder to try to make it sound like an oboe. But in any case, I went through the high school program, which was a terrific one. I was in the Chicago Youth Symphony for 3 years, which helped so much. And through solo contests and scholarshiping through there, I won. I got partial scholarships to go to Interlochen for 3 summers, and they actually offered me positions to go there during the year. But I had a really good situation with my high school and with the youth orchestra in Chicago, so I didn't do that. But I got to study with Dan Stoper when I was up there, and that was a terrific experience. And then I stayed again in Chicago. I had a full scholarship that I won at Interlochen for Peabody Conservatory, and that would have been 4 years of undergraduate there. But Ray Still, actually, I started studying with lyric opera and Chicago Symphony people pretty early on. And Ray Still said, why don't you just stay here and study with me? And okay, I didn't know any better, but so I went to school locally and studied with Chicago Symphony and lyric opera people. June Woolwich was English horn of lyric opera, and Gladys Elliott, principal oboe, and studied with her for 5 years, and Michael Hennock and Bob Mayer from the Chicago Symphony originally was my previous teacher, and then Ray Still, and then later John Mack. And but in Chicago, I went on from after high school. I started college again there, and with Ray Still, and played in the Civic Orchestra of Chicago, and that opened up the gates to playing extra with Chicago Symphony quite a bit, actually, and doing recordings, and so I was sort of getting my feet wet there. And all of a sudden one day a phone call rang from my first teacher or second teacher, Robert Mayer from the Chicago Symphony, who had retired. And he called me up and he said, I've heard that there's a principal oboe opening becoming available in the Florida Orchestra in Tampa, and you ought to take the audition. So I did. I flew down there, and it was my first professional audition, and I won. And so I was 21 at the time, and I was only a junior in college, but I finished up college. I was taking extra credits so I could do it in the summertime of the third year, and I moved down to Tampa and started there. I played in Tampa for 3 years, and then I won a position over in what became the Florida Philharmonic in Southeast Florida, and it served all the way from Miami all the way up through the Palm Beaches. And I spent the next 23 years there playing with the Florida Philharmonic, principal oboe, and also the Florida Grand Opera. And I taught for 12 years at the University of Miami, and I taught for 12 years and started the program at what was called the Herod Conservatory, but it's called the Music Conservatory at Lynn University now. In fact, when I left to come up to Illinois, Joe Robinson was asked to come down, and he's still teaching there. So I spent 23 years on the East Coast and had a wonderful time and career there. And then the University of Illinois opened up a position that brought me sort of back home with what was left of my family and up in the Chicago area. And I thought this was a great opportunity, and I started a family and with a wife and 2 boys. And so my wife said, let's try it, let's go. And so I won the position, which was terrific. And I've been here now 16 years. So I'm going on 20, and I feel like it's a third career for me. I'm so grateful to have this wonderful position. And so that kind of is more than I even want to say about myself, but I've been very lucky in my career and started very early. So of course, starting so early, I'm only 40. No. I'm still young enough to keep active and had a long career. So I'm very grateful.
That's such a fascinating journey. You've seemed to have just reimagined yourself.
Yeah, really, people say, how can we make a living in the oboe and all of that? And well, I think you guys know better than anybody. Work hard, try everything that comes up, and doors open. And as they open, take a look inside and see how it is. And I remember I was really studying to be an architect. I liked math and sciences. So even when I had a full music program available to me in high school, I still went science and math. And I remember when I won the job in Tampa, my father, who supported me, but he said, you're a smart kid. You could do anything. I thought you wanted to be an engineer and an architect. And I said, well, Dad, I've come to understand it's not so easy getting these playing jobs, and I might as well try it. And if it doesn't work out, I could go back, But he sort of cried. He says, you're not going to. He teared up. He didn't cry. But he said, it's a hard life, and musicians don't make very much money. And I said, well, it's what I enjoy most. And as we know, if you enjoy it the most, good things come. You enjoy getting up in the morning, going to work, you put things together, I started a music contracting business in Florida I had for 20 years, in addition to the teaching and the playing. And, just being involved with the great people we get to work with, the high level of ability and discipline and talent that are our colleagues it's been a great life working with you guys, having the interview today by two professionals that really know what they're doing. It's every bit of it is a positive.
Before we started recording, we were talking about how part of the joy of talking to people in this podcast is getting to know the oboe lineage and the teachers who can no longer be here through their students. And I was wondering if you could tell us anything about your experiences studying with these illustrious giants in the field that are no longer around. Can you share any memories with us?
Yeah. I think, again, when I think back to my fortunate exposure to these people who before us devoted their lives to music and to the craft, the reed making, and to the art of making music, and to the sharing of their life with students, and being so lucky to study with these people. I think my overview of working with some of those, greatest names that we associate now in our business is that they shared the things that were the most important. They shared the love of music, and sort of ingrained in their students the well-being, just knowing things would be okay. If and how important it is to take great care of creating a reputation and a standard in what we do by working hard, developing your fundamentals with strength and dignity. And as we know, it's a small world. We've heard that. And therefore, to treat one another with kindness and professionalism, and to meet and work with these people that have survived through what we know is a very difficult business. I was fortunate to just observe the good traits that they had and shared abundantly. Gladys Elliott was a gone now, but principal of the Lyric Opera, was just one of these people that would wisely share bits and pieces of information, personal, professional, and otherwise. John Mack, someone who would give his, right foot for any of his students, and would be up. We'd be talking at 1 a.m, like, what's he doing up and talking to me, or spending his weekend in his studio at home and not being with his family. I would say, Mr. Mack, would you want to go now to dinner with your family? And no, we'll go out to dinner. It's like, and I'm thinking, come on, it's just unbelievable. But he did that with everybody. He was just so giving. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of those things, like I said, with working with the types of people that we're fortunate to work with. It's a great profession, and we're very lucky to be in it and to have positions that sustain our life. But I think that's the one thing that really comes to mind. Personal, it's very rare too. I had my first teacher, again, I wasn't literally my first, my second was Robert Mayer from Chicago Symphony and Northwestern. And he was one that taught me, John, there are a lot of good players, a lot of good teachers, but very few mentors. And he was the first, and really others showed by example, but he was one that really defined mentorship and brought it home to me. And I'm really grateful that I learned that, because I really try to be a mentor to my students. And as we know, that means those extra efforts in writing letters, emails, phone calls, whatever it means, the extra time, the extra effort, time away from your family. It really is, but it's rewarding. I mean, it's sort of like the efforts you put into anything we do equal or are surpassed by the benefits that we get out of it personally. So it's not something of sacrifice as much as reward. And I've been very lucky to be exposed to some of those teachers that have given me that and also taught me how to share. I think, with other people.
That is really beautiful.
I'd love to hear more about your approach to and concept of mentoring, and maybe a bit about how you found your way to the University of Illinois. The beginning of your career, as you described it, was kind of orchestrally focused. And then you're at, this phenomenal school of music as an oboe professor. Was that a gradual change or just a manifestation of this concept of mentorship? I know it's a big question, but it kind of was formulating as you were speaking.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, to each of us, our journeys are different. And I think so much of what we end up doing is it's almost like there's a scent in front of us. What we enjoy and what we look for is what we end up really doing. And I was very fortunate. Well, first off, I suppose two major influences, Ray Still and John Mack, they weren't in my eyes anyway, the way they were teaching me they were not teaching me to play a second oboe role. And believe me, I respect that, and I wish I were a second oboe player for all these years. But what it kind of meant was, to me, it felt like there was a pressure almost put on me to earn a principal oboe job. So I was fortunate to get into that, or I don't think I would have stayed necessarily in the profession. Now that's a pretty thick statement, but where I'm getting with that is, as principal oboe, and then as you hit a city, rather the larger cities, Tampa first being one of them, but then probably more significantly Miami and the southeast of Florida, and you're principal oboe of a major orchestra, as I was fortunate to be, I was then invited to audition for a position at the University of Miami. Now, in our profession, playing and teaching, or teaching and playing, are the primary, I think we pretty much agree, means of earning a living and enjoying what we study to do. And so I was very fortunate to couple up almost entirely, as long as I was performing and considering myself a performer first, and then teacher second. I was very fortunate to be affiliated then with some really awesome schools, and schools of music and students and such, and really, really enjoyed it. And as we know in the profession, being able to play on stage at night and then try to articulate. I remember at first when I started teaching, it was more like I'd try to teach through demonstrating. And I would use fewer words, fewer descriptive aids. And then as I became more experienced as a teacher, I really learned that I started to express myself more clearly using words and descriptors, because I was thinking about my own playing more thoroughly. And as it's been said many times before, but as a player, you become a better become a better teacher. As a teacher, you become a better player, and they both are symbiotic, in that they help each other. And so I was very lucky to have that relationship in teaching as I was playing. Now, when it came to then, I had already put almost 30 years of performing in when the University of Illinois job came up. And at that point, I really did want to consider continue playing, but also I had an orchestra that was taken down. The Florida Phil had a problem, and there was right during a bad period of time, and the board of directors eliminated it, which was a difficult time for so many, and one of the first big orchestral catastrophes to occur. And again, I just think a ray from heaven came down when that position opened up in Illinois, because at that moment, having that possibility was tremendous. And I had already been prepared for teaching, because I'd already put in, 25 years of schooling on it, or, teaching down in Florida. So for me, it was like a natural answer, and it wasn't a sacrifice at all, because now, instead of, being a performer first and a teacher second, now I'd be a teacher first and a performer second, because as I mentioned, I've been so fortunate to be able to have two really good orchestras to perform with throughout the season while I also teach. And if the schedule for teaching gets a little much, it's not a big deal. I can let the management know, and there can be a substitute brought in. It's not quite like a major orchestra where there's a little more pressure to always be there. And so I have some flexibility too. So it was kind of a natural progression for me to go from playing and teaching to teaching and playing. And it's been a very good life. So I think I may have approached a couple of your perspectives there, but for me, it's just been very seamless. And I'm really grateful for that. I didn't have to make any great leaps. Everything worked out very well.
As you hinted at just now, sometimes balancing everything on your plate in teaching and performing and having a family and having, all of the different aspects of yourself fed and nourished can be very difficult. So I'd love to ask you about your approach to work-life balance, if that's a thing. We know that when we ask this question, some of our guests say, what is that?
Yeah. No, that's so true. It's very true. I'll tell you what, I'd be glad to address that. And well, first off, having, a partner, having my wife, having children, responsibilities to other people, responsibilities to your studio at school, to my own kids. In addition to that, I enjoy golf. I enjoy tennis. I'm glad to be able to still get out and play and support my boys who are going through. They've just gone through high school and they've been on the teams and stuff like that. And to, and getting out and just being able to share with them and our lives. And also, as we know, we've got reed making to do and practicing to do. So balance is such an important thing. What you have to become is organized. You have to become scheduled. I believe in writing things down actually in the schedule book so you can put time aside for things and make them like appointments so they're not optional. You actually have to become disciplined to them. And to become efficient in everything you do, to really assure the best job possible when the least of time is available. So I think that knowing what you're going to do when. So if it's reed making, there are times when, as we know, we practice and then we stop playing. We fool with our reed. We play 3 more minutes and we fool with our reed. We go back. That's okay to do that every once in a while.
I feel like you're talking directly to me right now.
Well, so many of us. I mean, that's how I grew up doing that. And then finally I came to that point where we realized that, you have to focus in. You have to really, get to the fundamentals. You've got to make reeds and only reeds. And then I've learned actually not even to test the reeds with my oboe, actually to keep the oboe out of the picture. Because I know you can spend an awful lot of time starting to noodle around in testing your reed, and that gets carried away. So what I really like to do is have those days that are just reed making with only testing the reed, getting the reed almost 99% finished with just what it tells us, with the crow and with the response and with all of the things it tells us without dealing with an oboe. And I think that in itself, it's almost like being blind and needing to have other senses heightened. And so when you work without an instrument and just reed making, your sensitivities become even more heightened and for reeds themselves. And then to practice and only practice and not to mess around with reeds. In fact, if you picked a bad reed to start with, stick with it, suffer through it. Rather than, I'm looking for a better reed. Don't get so fussy. Don't give yourself that elbow room, And I think that teaches students too, if you pass that on, which I try to do, the idea that we can't be switching our reeds constantly. We can't be so fussy. When you're in an audition, you've got to play from the first excerpt through the 7th excerpt, and no one's going to sit there waiting for you to switch a reed, and nor should you take that risk, probably, of switching in the middle. So whatever's in your instrument or in your mouth at that time, you keep it there and you do the best job. And that's where, and that was something Ray Still kind of taught. He had such an incredible ear, and he just made things happen with his embouchure and with his wind. He was an amazing, he could manipulate things to work. And so he would be the first person, he wouldn't even teach me reed making. He said, John, you've got to go to Gladys Elliott to learn reed making. I'm no good at it. But he always sounded good. And how did he do it? He did it through, he says, I make terrible reeds, but he made them sound pretty darn good considering everything. And it was because he had that ability to make do with what he had. And now you blend that with taking more time and being a good reed maker to get a better product with the discipline of using your ear and listening and not depending only on the reed. And then you get this balance of listening skills, using your air, minimizing but utilizing the embouchure efficiently, and putting it together. And I think that is another good thing for students to remember when they go from one teacher to the next. Everything's good. Just accumulate the good from the various people you work with. Every bit of it won't necessarily be what you want to take down your journey, but take the good, and make that stew your own creation, your own blend of the things that work for you in your life. And anyway, so I think that's a great thing. And students shouldn't be afraid to ask for lessons from various people. And I know I encourage my students to go out and take lessons with people, because when they come back, they say, oh, guess what Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so said? And I said, well, that's terrific. Hey, great. I told it to them last week too. Also, it doesn't matter. They're getting it and it's sticking when someone else says it,
That is so true. You're like, I've been telling you that for 3 years, but I'm glad you're coming around.
Right. So good.
As someone who's done a lot of high stakes performing, what advice do you have for people struggling with performance anxiety?
Oh, listen, that's such a good topic. And I don't know, I've seen I don't know if you guys have seen this or not, but it seems like there's been a little more performance anxiety of late than there ever seems to have been before. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it is something we do need to address actively. And I'm not a trained psychiatrist, so I can't really play, the couch game with the, talking through the psychological elements of it. I like to approach it from that which I can deal with. And one of the things is for me to have my students, and I do this too, it comes from my own experience. I like to write in my music, in pencil, folks, but write in my music as many things as I can to help me, remind me, encourage me to play as I want something to go. Even if a crescendo is written, perhaps I've played it the way it's written, and when I listen back in a recording, it's not enough crescendo. I will exaggerate that marking in the music. I'll put a smiley face if I want to feel happy somewhere. I'll put a few words of encouragement in the opening margin before I start to give me the character of the piece, the sentiment, the emotional value of the piece I'm trying to get into the mood of playing, especially in an audition scenario when we have to move quickly from one type of excerpt to another. It's important to get in the mood very quickly and to be in the right place in the right space before you start. And so I like to encourage everyone to keep busy writing in encouragements, lines over notes, arrows forward for tempo rubato or backwards for rallentandos, maybe a squiggle line for vibrato to remind yourself to vibrate. Whatever the best things that you've done and the things that sound the best when you record yourself in playback and follow the music along with your pencil is what I try to do, so that you practice each time you come back, following your own numbers and hieroglyphics that you put in the music. You up your game, you play at a higher standard. You come back to the high standard. You don't start from scratch every time because you can't quite remember what happened best the last time. So you start to play at a higher level. And the objective being then when you go and play whatever it is you are to play in public at a recital or in an audition, that again, just like your best practice sessions, you reenact those encouragements that you've given yourself all the time. And you're busy, you're very busy and involved with following those to great detail, exaggerating them. And my premise is with anxiety that if you're that busy, involved in your music, involved in playing it at that standard that you've achieved, you'll be far less conscious of what's going on around you. You just simply, wherever you're playing, whatever different room that might be in, you have to come back to playing for yourself and to establish or try to beat your own standards, not to worry about other people, the way other people are playing in the warm-up room, or being self-defeating in that way. Rather, just be able to play at your level and to represent yourself well. And I think that, again, gets into a little bit of a concept of competition, but more or less, I think that we can really be positive about getting in front of people and having a job to do. And our job is to do the best as we can with that music. So to become involved and keep yourself focused, I think that's probably the main thing I would say about performance anxiety. In addition to eating well, sleeping, being sure to sleep, and you know, they say a couple bananas for the potassium, and you know, various things like that can't hurt. But I think more than anything, it's about being well rehearsed, being ready. And it's just like cramming for a test is never a good experience for anyone. But if you've studied and you really know your material, you go in with much more confidence. And I think that's probably the key to me anyway.
You mentioned positivity, and you project such a beautiful sense of positivity and gratitude. And I would love to know what role that takes on in your teaching. And do you encourage your students to take on a positive mindset and an attitude of gratitude, if you will? And does that help with because I agree with you that there is a lot of not only performance anxiety, but general anxiety, especially these days. And does that help with, you know, guiding and mentoring your students through this career?
Yes, an attitude of gratitude. You just said it. And I tell you, I think that's a big root of a lot of good. And I think that it's almost a grand secret that I do try to encourage my studio. And I just love your question, because it's filled with exactly the type of encouragement that we have to share with one another about what we do, especially as we know as double reed players, when we can't just pick that instrument up and expect it to be like it was yesterday, like a flute, or, you know, we have that reed, and most of the time we know we don't have a good reed even. It's not encouraging us. You know, we're not being encouraged from within the instrument. So we have to be very hopeful people and very positive in our nature. Looking for the good in something, like having that twinkle in our eye at every blank that it might end up becoming the next best read, you know. And so I think you nail it. Sometimes it's not even the topics we talk about, but I think you nailed it. I think because of your ability and your sensitivity, it's the unspoken word, it's the attitude that we bring to our studio and to our students that you just verbalized, that I think is so important. So do I do that? I hope I do. I think that I've been pretty successful in students that have gone out and had very good careers, and they're playing actively now in some of the major groups in the world, but they'd be the ones to answer that. But I'll tell you what, I hope that I do. I hope that I do. Thank you. Thank you for bringing up the topic. It's a very important one. But it starts at home. I think we need to stay positive and stay organized in our reed making, for example, so that we don't start crystal balling every reed. Rather, we have a bit of a scientific method involved, and that we approach things in a rational way, and we keep our reed case organized. I think that it's a very important element to keep our reed desk as clear in a sense as our mind must be. It's calming. It's calming to be simple and organized.
If you have that, then it's easier to combat the sense of impending doom going into a practice session or a reed making session. I love that.
So true. So well put.
What are some ways that you approach running your studio class? And what have you found to be effective in terms of teaching in that group environment?
Yeah. We have at the University of Illinois, like most of you probably have, we're fortunate to have not only the weekly lessons hour for each student, but we have Tuesday morning an hour class for performance studio, oboe studio, and on Thursday an hour in the morning for reed making class. So we have 2 studio classes. So every student has 3 hours of guaranteed exposure in the oboe studio or to the teacher each week. In performance class, I choose, I should say, in managing the class to speak to topics. So for example, I'll have my graduate students, I'll find out what their interests are and their fortes. And this year, for example, I had 5 graduate students each give a presentation on a different topic and having to do with performance related. And so those would be like lectures, and they'd be spaced out, maybe 3 weeks apart or so. And then we would, in the first semester, I like to organize around orchestral excerpts training or audition training. Basically, that's what that covers. And what we'll do is we'll have the music, of course, present and projected. And I always employ my TAs in really getting them so involved so that when they step out of being a TA at the University of Illinois, they are really very much ready to step into a job because they're doing so many different things, and I'm very proud of them. So I'll have them organize some of our shared screens and projected elements in the classes. But what we'll do is we'll work on orchestral excerpts. They'll be played in each of our lessons, so they get individual training on them. We'll do a class in them. We'll have usually 3 players play the excerpt for the day. We'll have written comments that'll be offered afterwards. We'll have verbal comments also as a part of that training. It'll teach, we have an atmosphere of learning that is supportive, and it's, we always start with a positive element to their playing. And then if there's a suggestion for improvement, and we keep it in a very positive tone like that, and the students are terrific in doing that and very supportive of one another. And it creates that professionalism where I'd like to think that that's going to continue on as they step into the woodwind section of an orchestra. And they're dealing with then the other people around them in how they talk to them and how they interact. And so organizing that with the reed class, of course, Zoom reed classes are a special thrill, as you guys know. You really can't do very much when it comes to the edge of that tip. But it is an opportunity to speak to issues of selection of cane, gouging, shaping. And so we'll have opportunities again for these lectures, demonstrations, work pretty well. And then I do breakout rooms. And that's one of the nice things about the Zoom classes, where breakout rooms where I have a graduate student in each of the breakout rooms, for example, and I'll butterfly.
That is a great idea.
All of them, yeah. And it really does work out. So there can be that conversation going on with, 4 or 5 players in a room. And it works very nice in small group. So that's how we manage things pretty much over at the University of Illinois.
What is some of your favorite repertoire to play?
Oh, I'll tell you what, I guess it goes back to almost my band days, and I enjoy band music. We used to do a lot of transcriptions in high school, which was kind of fun. That's how I learned so much orchestral music early on. It was through the band, actually, and then until I got into an orchestra. But I think that rubbed off, and I really enjoy the serenades, like the wind serenades of Mozart.
I love those.
Oh, aren't they fantastic?
Yes.
So, just because it's like having a small wind band, pairs of vocals, clarinets, bassoons, and horns. And that's probably my go-to. And then I really enjoy playing with string quartets, or trios. So like the Mozart Oboe Quartet, I've got one of my recordings features that. And I just think that is a tremendous way to bridge what I'll consider the natural gap between a string player or techniques and wind techniques. And to really I really recommend students go to master classes of vocal and string technique, master classes, to try to emulate, whether it's a finger sliding on a string, which might be the equivalent of the reed being rolled into the embouchure a little bit and doing a bit of let's call it a lip slur, just learning a little bit of that technique that might be taken from a string technique. And various, how the bow is used at the tip versus the frog, and how that can be our palette of articulation. Mm-hmm. To build those fundamental tools that we have to expand upon, like articulation and dynamics and tempo rubato and intonational differences, intervallic relationships, things like that, and how to make changes, subtle changes in intonation, for example, without changing your embouchure, which can be done with the right thumb just by pushing in or pulling out the reed a little bit. And just, again, things that you learn along the way, little trade secrets that again can somehow be initialized by going to master classes of other instruments and thinking about your applications. I think that's tremendous. Some other music, I love Poulenc. I think he's outrageous. The sextet and even the sonata and the trio for oboe, bassoon, and piano, which I got to play a couple months ago with a mask on, which don't recommend to anyone, but it looks like we have to do that kind of thing nowadays. Thankfully, no broken reeds. That was a remarkable feat, not to come away with a broken reed. But Berlioz, I think, when it comes to symphonic music, I think he's very colorful and interesting. And in opera, having had opera experience, just such gorgeous music. I mean, whether it's Puccini or even Verdi's many operas. I think we're so lucky to have such beautiful repertoire to go to, whether it's solo, chamber music, which is so great, in winds or in combinations. But I think we need to look at it, and we can see the value with all the different genres, whether it's opera, symphony, solo, or chamber music. And so I sort of have, Mahler, love Mahler. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's a lit. When things are repeated to the 10th and 12th time, I might say, okay, maybe enough. But who am I to judge Mahler, So
What advice would you give to a young musician who aspires to have a career like yours?
I think it's probably more than anything, enjoy what you do. Enjoy it. Don't look at if you're looking at it as any type of hard labor, it's probably not for you. If you enjoy it and it's your refuge, if it's someplace you can go to enjoy yourself for a moment or get away from this or that, and you find yourself playing a little while to calm yourself down and to bring things into focus, that's the right attitude. When doors open, audition for everything. Say, especially for young students, say yes to almost everything. Try it all, and to welcome the different things that we do. And so I think keeping an open mind and being flexible in the profession is very important. and pursuing the things that you like the most. And after a while, you don't have to say yes to everything. If there's certain things that you're not preferring, then you say no, and you kind of find your niche in there. But I would say be sure that you're enjoying it, and take advantage of opportunities to play as much as you can, and to share what you have openly with people. It's a small and friendly world that we have, especially the double reed world. And everything we can do to help one another, I think, is just for people to understand that it's a giving world and not a selfish one. I think that's important, just as a guide to our personalities. I think it's just to let them know that's the world they're in. I remember I was working at Edmund Nielsen's back in the day in Chicago when Mr. Nielsen was still alive and repairing instruments, and Mrs. Nielsen was taking care of front of house, and she put me in charge of packing something or getting orders and filling them. And I remember a check wasn't in one of the envelopes, and I was the first time I had that happen. I said, Mrs. Nielsen, do you want me to fill this order? There was no check. And she goes, oh yeah, just fill it and send it out. I said, well, what if they don't pay you? And she goes, oh, John, it's a small world. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. We all know each other. It was kind of made me think like that. It's like, oh, and if they didn't pay, I guess I figured, well, I guess they won't get any more orders from the Nielsens anymore but at very worst. But I don't think that was really what she was saying. I think it was more like, it's all good. I've worked with them before, and we trust each other, and it was kind of a nice, heartening lesson for a young man to hear. So I think that's kind of the world we're in, where people do things for each other.
John, this was such a warm and motivating and inspirational conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on Double Reed Dish. We really appreciate it.
Deli, you're terrific. And Jackie, talk about warm and inviting. You're the best. You guys are super. I appreciate being here. Thank you.
Oh, we hope you enjoyed that interview so much. Please follow us on social media and rate and review on iTunes. It does make a difference. Galit, who's coming up on our next episode?
Next episode, we are talking to the amazing and hilarious Miles Maynor, bassoonist in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Jackie, let's end this nerd parade.
Go make reeds if it fits in your version of self-care for today.
But it probably does, so do it.
Make time for reeds. How about that? Yeah. Make time for reeds.
Yeah.